Welcome to Talkin' Business. I'm Joe Catrambone, CEO of the Stewart Martin County Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to have RJ Farina from RJF Environmental Consulting Services with me today. RJ, thank you
Joe.
so much for taking time out of your
Absolutely.
busy schedule.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
My pleasure. I'm glad we got together and were
Absolutely.
able to do this.
Two fellow Italians.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to. So, where are you from originally?
Long Island, New York, and then we moved down here in 2000. We opened up RJF in 2007, so the longevity is starting to creep up.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So you live in Palm City or
We
Martin County?
actually, I moved up my family. I have two young children, a 5 and a 3-year-old, and we moved up to Stewart in May of this year from Boca Raton.
Oh, from Boca.
So we're brand new
Yeah.
to Stewart.
Yeah, you picked a good place. Boca's a great place.
It is. It got a little congested. All those New Yorkers are coming down here. So, but we love it here. It's a special place, and I recognized that early on, and that kind of really made me want to submerge myself in the chamber and be involved in the community, because Stewart being a smaller town, and you get a little bit of everything. Sometimes I feel like I'm up in the country, and then you realize you're 2 miles from the water. So it's a quaint, sleepy town, and that's where we like
It's
it.
a special place.
It is a
It's
special place.
So it always intrigues me how people ended up here.
Absolutely.
So were you ever here before? Did you visit?
That's a great question. So my in-laws actually retired from Pompano Beach. They lived there for 45 years, and they moved up here. And every time we would come and visit, we fell in love so much in their neighborhood, with their neighborhood, that we ended up buying a house 2 streets over in their neighborhood.
Great.
So we recognized the charm and the difference very early on, and having 2 small children, it was kind of a family decision. I wanted to raise my family up here, and my daughter was starting kindergarten, and I said, if we're going to make this move, we're doing it now. I don't want to pull her out of school
Yeah,
and
'cause
do
that's
it.
traumatic for kids.
Well, it was done to me actually when I was I was 12 years old when we moved from Long Island in the middle of a school year. And that was traumatic. So I didn't want her to go through that, even though she's a little younger than 12. I didn't want to do that. So we pulled the trigger, and we haven't looked back.
You ended up in a great place.
Absolutely.
Was there? Did you find any culture shock or?
Not really, no. I mean, the diversity, I think, is everywhere. But I have noticed that, and this is very positive about the area, is that the people up here are just a lot nicer. Whether it's the people at the UPS store or Publix or your haircut, your barber, everybody's just, there's a different attitude, and it's slower paced. I told my friend who still lives down in South Florida, I said, I haven't gotten honked at in 6 months.
It is kind of laid back. And
Yeah.
I think that it's so much smaller than, Boca and Palm
Absolutely.
Beach County and Broward and Dade. So it's more people get to know you
Right.
intimately. because
Absolutely.
There's not as many people.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And so, like you say, your barber, or the restaurant you may, they want you to come back.
Yeah.
Because they don't have an overwhelming number of people like Palm Beach. So if
Right.
you don't come back, somebody will replace you.
Right.
But so people learn that it's better to be nice to people, to treat people
Well,
nice.
always.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
everything in life.
Yeah.
You want to be nice to people.
I agree.
You don't know what people are going through, and you always treat people with respect
Yeah.
until they give you a reason not to.
Yeah, then you deal with it at that time.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me about first of all, you got you basically cover the state,
Yes.
from the Keys to Jacksonville to the west coast of Florida.
Yes, sir.
Will you just explain to me, but was that the most strategic, is Martin County the most strategic place you could have ended up, or is it just because you fell in love with the community?
Actually, it was a little bit of both, because we're a family-owned business, and it's my father and I. You know, he started our company in 2007. I ended school obtaining a bachelor's in psychology in 2009. Psychology. And I didn't know what my next move was. I didn't know if I wanted to go back to school to further my education. I wasn't sure which direction I was going. Given I was in my early 20s, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So my father said, well, why don't you learn the family business, and while you figure it out.
Yeah, that's
So
kind of a no-brainer.
a no-brainer. 16 years later, I'm still figuring it out.
That's great.
But I love what we do. And to answer your question, it is a little bit of both, because now the service calls that come up above Palm Beach County are not such an inconvenience, or Port St. Lucie, or we've had a job in Vero Beach last week. Jupiter calls are coming in. So, the way to as a two-man team to split up the territory, really anything from Palm Beach and above, I will take care of, and Palm Beach and south, my father takes care of. And
That's a good. Yeah, that's a good situation.
yeah, so there has been some strategic or strategy to the move, but we're going to make it work no matter. And there are days where I have to commute to Boca Raton and Delray and Boynton, sometimes Fort Lauderdale. Do I want to do that every day? Not necessarily, but you do what you have to do.
Yeah, as long as it's not every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, what's your typical client? Like you said, you had a call this morning.
Yeah.
Typically, what happens? What gets you involved?
So we're involved in both commercial and residential properties. This morning was a commercial property manager. So property managers, both residential and commercial, would be a very good demographic of clientele for us. And then we do residential calls. I actually did one for a fellow chain member last week, Mr. Frank Labuti. Great guy. I think I have a feeling you know him well.
He's a great guy.
He called me. He had an odor in his house, and he wasn't sure what was going on. And he had a situation a couple of years ago, and he had a pristine, beautiful house. And so, really, I say this jokingly, but if you have 4 walls and an HVAC unit, you can be a client, because in South Florida, humidity is 85% of.
That's a killer.
It's a killer. And ASHRAE, the American Standard of Heating, Refrigeration, and Engineering, they state that you want to keep your relative humidity under 60%. I always advise my clients to keep it under 55%. If you keep it under 55% and even into the 40s, where you have a drier environment, mold growth cannot occur because it needs moisture. So in South Florida, relative humidity is usually the culprit of a lot of indoor air quality issues.
So your air conditioner takes humidity out of.
Correct.
So a standard air conditioner, what type of humidity do you have that the air conditioner takes care of? I mean, when you're saying, are you suggesting people should have dehumidifiers in their house?
Well, it's situational. No, if your AC unit is properly, or your HVAC unit is properly sized to your house, mm-hmm. and does not have any deficiencies, and it operates correctly, it dehumidifies.
So a standard type
Absolutely.
Air conditioner will, and it'll keep it at that.
It should. Okay. It should. Yeah, there are a couple anomalies where if your unit is oversized, sometimes you're getting too much cold air and it can't recirculate, where it ends up becoming stale air, and then your moisture levels could rise, which in result can lead to relative humidity levels becoming elevated.
What would tell me that my humidity was too high in a house? Is it the windows fogging up? Is it?
No, I think condensation on the windows in Florida is normal, especially in the summer months. A couple of indications would be musty or stale odors.
Okay.
And you could usually feel it once you enter a different temperature or humidity atmosphere. You could the biggest sign of relative humidity being elevated is an odor, or what we call stale air.
Okay.
And that is in conjunction with proper air circulation. So when your house is being built, you have two different vents on your ceiling. You have a return vent, and you, depending on the size of your house, you usually have maybe two or three of those throughout the house. And that's probably referring to a larger house. Some houses usually only have one or two. And then you have your supply vents, and those are the vents that are in every room
That blow the cold air.
that supply your house with cold air. But the supply to return vent ratio needs to be correct, because it is all about air circulation and air turnover. And if everything is in conjunction, it will dehumidify correctly and keep your relative humidity levels low. A lot of times I see in closets in particular, you either have a supply vent and no return vent. So if you have a supply vent and no return vent, and you close that closet door,
You're not getting circulation.
you're already a pro.
Yeah, yeah, right. Well, you explained it well. That's why. Yeah, we have a situation on our second floor in the at the chamber.
Okay, I think I know a guy.
Do you think?
I think.
We've been dealing with this and I know the reason is when the building was built, the upstairs was one big room.
Okay.
It was not partitioned off.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the vents are placed for a big, wide open space.
Right.
Now we have built offices and it's chopped up.
Right.
And I know it's because the air isn't circulating properly. So,
Yeah.
but it would probably take I don't know what, to replace the vents and the returns and all of that.
Well,
It's probably,
it would get costly to probably get an HVAC engineer in there to redesign the ductwork. And there are things that you could do that, I think that would be a step before you go to that extreme. If, first off, if I were to come upstairs to the building that I know very well, I would take relative humidity readings in every room, and maybe ones that are above 55, in the 60s. If they're climbing into the 60s, that's your trouble area. Then you would think about getting a dehumidifier, because
we have them.
okay,
I got two running.
okay, all right. So maybe the relative humidity isn't as high because you do have two dehus. Now they make dehumidifiers these days, and I don't know if these are the ones that you have. I actually haven't been upstairs. You'll invite me up there next time.
I will, for sure.
They make dehumidifiers that have drain lines. So instead, and I don't know who maintains the dehumidifiers, but you have two types of dehus. Ones with buckets that you have to physically empty out.
These have drain lines.
Perfect.
They're plastic,
Yes,
clear plastic.
and they drain into a sink or
Yeah.
perfect.
So-
So they're relatively maintenance free, and they're consistently pulling moisture out of the air and keeping that relative humidity level down. But it is, and you know exactly why, because the upstairs of that building was not designed to have different rooms.
Yeah, I would think probably each office should have a vent in it.
It absolutely should,
Yes.
and I'll do you one better. It should have two types of vents in it: a return
Turn
vent
and a vent.
and a supply vent. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh God. This probably, well, almost probably 2 years we've been dealing with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Is that so? What other types of issues do you deal with? Is it strictly that type of humidity factor? Or?
Well, with humidity comes mold growth. So we perform indoor air quality inspections and assessments. Air testing and mold testing is part of what we do. We also do water testing if a residential or even a commercial building, and I've done it in both, is worried about the quality of water. If there were any contaminants in the water, that could be tested. Everything we do is sent through a third-party laboratory. The lab that we use is nationally accredited, and they have the highest amount of accreditations you can have. So I, in 15 years, have never been called into court. I know my dad has been an expert witness a few times, but when they're looking at your data, if you're not using an accredited lab, nothing that you do holds water. None of your reports or inspections mean anything if your results are not accredited. So, having said that, we also do VOC testing, which is volatile organic compounds. And that's when really anything in a building, like the paint or drywall or the baseboards, or even in some places where they have vinyl wallpaper and glue, really it's anything that could chemically off gas that could create an odor and potentially a health risk. So a couple of years ago, there was a flooring company that was under a lot of scrutiny because they used formaldehyde in their flooring materials. And you had a lot of people, I believe it became a national litigation, one of those recalls, where you had customers complain that there was an odor and they weren't feeling well. And it turns out that there was a substantial amount of formaldehyde in their house because of this particular material off-gassing, VOCs. So we test for that as well. Usually, and this is a statute that was written, I think, in 2011, that you cannot test and remediate your own job. So there are a lot of remediation companies out there, licensed remediation companies out here, that do water mitigation and mold remediation, fire and flood stuff. However, you need a third-party independent firm to come in, test, and this is what we do. We'll test and assess the situation based on the analytical results we get. We write a very thorough protocol and a report, and that's given to the customer. And then the customer can decide on which licensed remediation company they want to use, but the remediation company has to follow our report, our protocol. We're kind of like a referee. We're keeping everybody honest. And when they're done, we would come in to do what's called clearance testing. So if my initial assessment was done on January 26th, and I saw that there was a mold spore elevation in various rooms, I would write my report and my protocol pertaining to those rooms. And I would basically dictate what needs to be done. If the HVAC needs to be disinfected, if we need to bring in HEPA air filters or dehumidifiers, if any of the drywall needs to be removed, stuff like that. So in my protocol, it's very meticulously written where it's itemized step by step of what you need to do. And then once that is done, I would come back to do clearance testing. So when I do my clearance testing on, let's say, February 3rd, we've had a week in between and a remediation's been performed in that week. I now have a baseline, which was January 26th. I'd look at my counts, and now the second visit, I need to see in those particular rooms, the spore levels come down to a normal and acceptable level. When I say that, mold spores, most of them come from the outside, okay? There are certain species that are grown from water intrusions, but sometimes when you open up your windows and doors, you're letting in spores because they come from plants. Every single house in Florida or in the United States has some type of spore activity. Most of the time, it's normal. It's an acceptable level, and our nasal passages and our own filtration system, as in our body, filters these out. But when they become elevated, it could potentially become a health concern. People can experience adverse health reactions. So we do the initial assessment, the remediation's performed, and then we come in to do the clearance. And once we see that it was done properly visually and the numbers add up, we clear the project with a clearance report or a clearance certificate. And that basically can determine if the remediation company can come pull their equipment out. Everything that they've installed can now leave the property, and the homeowner or the property manager or building owner can now proceed with the rebuild and put their place back together.
So you don't do any of the manual?
We don't,
All
no.
you do is recommend?
Yes,
and then
sir.
you have subcontractors you deal with? Or
Yeah, I mean, we know there are a lot of remediation companies in Florida, and I'm used to saying South Florida, but we're not so south anymore.
Right.
And some are better than others, and I work with various companies that are very reputable and very easy to work with, and I've had wonderful experiences with some companies and not so wonderful experiences.
Yeah, well, that's
And that's anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so no, we don't do the physical remediation. We cannot, and that's Florida statute. So it's kind of a work smarter, not harder type mentality. We do dictate what needs to be done, but once we cannot do both. And that statute was written after the series of hurricanes almost 20 years ago when we had back to back. I think it was, I don't even want to attempt to name them. I think one of them was Hurricane Gene. I don't remember the other one, but my point is you had elderly people in buildings like Century Village or John Knox Village. These are facilities down south. But you would have companies come in and say, "Oh, I see that you have water and a water intrusion. That'll be $75,000, and we'll clean it up for you. We'll take care of it." And these people were getting charged an arm and a leg for work that didn't really need to be done. So that's really when that statute was written, and we as a third party are now kind of able to come in and determine what needs to be done based on a visual and scientific approach. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
That's great service. We're winding down. Is there anything we missed that you might want people to know about? Or
We focus a lot on hurricane safety. That's big. Obviously, in Florida, we have certain months out of the year that hurricane safety and prep is very important. So after, a hurricane comes in, or we'll do, storm follow-up to make sure that everything's dry and that there's no property damage. But I think that we've covered everything. I do just want to add that being a member of the chamber, and I've been very vocal about this, when we moved up here, I said, okay, this is new territory, and I need to kind of grow up here. I need to make myself known, my presence known. The chamber has been a wonderful outlet to present yourself, get to know wonderful professionals. I was recently named an ambassador of this year, and I'm proud to kind of carry that tag.
I appreciate that. That means a lot.
That was a goal that I had set out for myself in May when we moved up here. I said, I'm going to join the chamber, and I'm going to become an ambassador. And it was kind of a personal win when I got that email from Amy. I was very honored, and it's not something that I take lightly. I used it earlier in the interview, but I said the word submerge. And that really is how I feel about submerging myself into the chamber and the community, because Stewart is a special place. And I plan on living here for a very long time and hopefully becoming, successful part of the Stewart community. So I just want to, I wanted to let you know that that's how I personally feel about the chamber.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we
Absolutely.
appreciate Ambassador is so important to what we do. It keeps us in tune with our members.
Absolutely.
So keep
Yeah.
up the good work.
Thank you, sir. I will try.
Okay.